All right, let's move on to number 5. This one's called Kids in the Museum.
Just over 10 years ago, when I was in the Royal Academy, a museum in the center of London, with my 3 children at the Aztec exhibition. I don't know if any of you saw it. I had an older child and 2 younger children, twins, is shown in this picture. And one of my children, 3 years old, shouted, and I've never denied he shouted. He shouted, "Monster! Monster!" at this statue, which looked just like a monster. It had snakes for hair, a big beak for a nose, and I thought, this is fantastic. I got a 3-year-old that's appreciating pre-Hispanic art. How good can it get? So I bent down. I said, yes, it looks like a monster. And at that moment, a security guard came over. Then a gallery assistant came over and said, we're being too noisy, and threw us out. Roll the family. During that time, I was a journalist with the Guardian newspaper. And 2 days later, I wrote a big piece in the Guardian about being thrown out of the Royal Academy. And what was really interesting was by the end of that day, at the paper, we had over 500 emails from other families saying, museums aren't working for us. Let's try and make it work. So that's what we did in the garden. We set up a campaign for the Kids Museums campaign. It didn't really exist. It was just a few pages long run, those stories on it. I began touring the country talking about how to make your museum more family friendly. I was a journalist. I was called in to see the then director of the National Gallery in London. I'll never forget this moment when he, a communist, said, we really like the Kids Museum campaign, and we've been talking on the board about it. We have some great ideas of how we might work together, and I'd like you to take them back to your team.
All right. That lecture was a little bit different to some of the previous ones that we've had. Now, let's see. Who have I not picked on yet tonight? RRZ, would you like to have a try? No? Okay. That's all right. Huang, would you like to have a go?
Yes.
All right. Fantastic. So before we start, do you have any idea what kind of lecture this was?
It's talk about her campaign and what makes her to raise this campaign.
Yes, correct. So that's the content. That's the topic of this particular lecture. Okay, but the type of lecture is not anything to do with the content. This type of lecture is what we call a narrative or a story. Okay, so basically this person is telling a story about a series of things that happened. And what you guys always just want to remember with a story is that a story is basically just a series of actions or events. It's basically something happened, and then something else happened, and then something else happened, and then something else happened. At some point in that sequence was the campaign part. Okay, but she didn't start talking about her campaign right at the beginning. What was the start of her story? Do you remember?
She and her 3 kids was in the museum, but they are too noisy and be thrown out.
So speaker went to the museum with her kids. They were too noisy and got thrown out. Good. And then what happened after that?
She want to make the museum more family friendly, so he raised the Kids Museum campaign.
Yeah, good. She started a campaign to make museums more kid-friendly. Now, there was a little bit you missed in the middle, right? So there was something else in the middle here, and then one last thing at the end. So there were a total of 5 different steps in this particular story, right? So do you remember there was something between they were too noisy, got thrown out, and she started the campaign? Do you remember what that was?
No, exactly.
No. So she said she was a journalist and she wrote an article in the newspaper essentially complaining about it. And she got a lot of feedback, like a lot of other people had the same experience. And that's why she started the campaign. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So it was something like she published a newspaper article about it, right? And got a lot of, let's call it community support, right? People with the same experience, right? And that's when she started a campaign to try to make museums more kid friendly. And then what was the final, there was one last part at the end talking about the result. Do you remember what it was?
Somebody interested in her campaign?
Yeah. The director of she got thrown out of, right? Kind of was interested to help or something along those lines. Okay, so the story kind of came around full circle. The person who was in charge of that museum kind of ended up contacting her afterwards. Okay, and that's the full story from start to finish. So you might say that those were all the distinct individual events that happened in that sequence. All right, and you can see each one logically links to the next one nice and smoothly. That's usually a good way to tell whether or not you have all the main points in a story. Yeah, there you go. So this one, much more than any of the previous pieces, this one is much more like a retelling where we're literally saying, and then this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. Stories are usually nice and easy to follow. Yeah, thank you very much. Really well done, Juan. Good job. Now, if you're wondering what happens if, for example, you forget to mention this, well, you can think of it like this, right? Your content is marked out of 5 for something like retail lecture, and it's marked out of 2 for summarized spoken text. In this type of exercise, what's going to happen is if you miss one of the points, you literally just lose that particular percentage. So if this was retail lecture, right, you'd get 4 of the other points. That'd be 4 out of 5. If this was a summarized spoken text, you'd probably get 1.5 out of 2. Okay, so if we are missing information, it'll probably be a small deduction in your content score.